Have a green sheet of paper, and I always like green because I know what color it is. So, last Thursday, we handed out the short profile that just had 22 and 23 on it, and it didn't have all of the other bills that are in conference. And then we were requested to put a 5-year profile together, and we always think they're very difficult, so just want to let people know that this is more of a planning document than what we think is going to happen. So with this document, we like people just look at the general trends of what's showing, not necessarily whether we have, a $500 million balance or $500 or $1 million negative balance. It's those trends that we like people to look at. Okay, having said that, we talked about the two bills that have been passed and signed by the governor, 2239 and 267. Those are included in those consensus revenue estimates as of 420. For this purpose, we went back and added in all of the conference committee adjustments that are out there in conference, haven't been passed yet. We added 421, the Capers bill, $1 billion. We added the full food sales tax, 2106, and that's stepping 2% in January of 23, and then down to 4% the next 4%, 2%, and 0. So 23, 4, 24, 2, and then 25, 0. We put the RAWs and tax credits in from 2237, come in at about $26 million, and then going up about $14 million a year. 2597, it had all those various tax adjustments in it. And we also then included the Apex estimate, and this is the 10-year estimate for expenditures. The only adjustment that was really made in expenditures, there were two. We made sure and put in 2239. That's the property tax exemption going in from schools from 20 mils or 20,000 on the 20 mils to 40,000 valuation. It's about $42 million, $43 million a year. And once again, we put in the Apex expenditures. For the projections, it's a really difficult time to put where we think we're going to be, so we kind of put ourselves in the middle. We could be, continuing the growth that we have and having much higher trends. We could go into a recession and have everything really drop out of the bottom. But we went in with some, but minimal growth for 2024 and 25. So you'll see that the increases in 23 are from the 2.445 billion only up to $2.5 billion. And then from 2.5 billion in 24 up to 9,535 in 25, and then a little bit larger growth in 26 when we're projecting it's about a 2% increase. So when we look at just pure percentages, we have about 0.6% increase in taxes from 23 into 24, and then about 4%, not quite, from 24 to 25. The big change we had in 25 was corporate income. We had it dropping 10%. We didn't feel that we'd be able to maintain that $620 million receipts for those out years. So we have it going down 5% in 24, 10% in 25, and then going back up in 26. On the expenditure side, we did adjust school finance for the higher inflation. Right now, we have the increase in 24 of 170 million, 25 going up to 180 million, and then starting to drop back down in 26. And you'll recall that the rate that we're supposed to be increasing education by is the 3-year average of the the mountain CPIU. So we're projecting that 26 will start to drop when some of those higher years fall off. And that would be most of the assumptions that we had in here. So as far as then ending balances go, projections in 2023 would drop to about 1.7 billion. It would pop up a little bit in 24. That's because of those one-time expenditures that we have included in 23 would go away in 24. So that would rise up to about a little over 1.7 billion, and then start that more steady decline down to 1.3 billion in 25. And then in 26, we have the ending balance estimate at about $646 million. One of the items that I like to look at are the receipts above or below expenditures. We are above that amount in each year, so we're bringing in more money than we're actually spending, but that's on a steady decline after 24 with the one-time expenditures. So trend is heading down, but still leaves almost a 7% ending balance in 2026. So just wanted to kind of go over real quick where we had those estimates, and hopefully once again, nobody would have any questions.
Thank you, JR, or JG, excuse me. The HB 2237, the rural opportunity zones, I was reading a conference committee report this morning, and it looks like they took RAWs out of that. Do you know anything about that? Did I look at that wrong?
I thought it was still included, but we'll go back and double check.
I think the way I read it, that's out, so.
We'll double check.
Thank you. Other questions for JG? Seeing none. Oh, Senator Petty.
Thank you. I didn't quite understand in the ending balance when we get. I did want to say I thought when you said how hard it is to go out to 25, if we went back to 19 and tried to go out, then nobody would have projected this, but
exactly.
and everything in between. But I'm looking at that ending SGF balance, that somewhat large drop there from 13.9 to 6.8%. And again, what's that based on?
A lot of that is going to be that compounding effect of school finance, because we would be adding 170 in 24, and then that 170 would be in the base. So then we would add an additional $180 million, and then an additional 145. So until that inflation drops off, then those increases are going to continue to really compound. And the other thing that really is starting to show that impact is the food sales tax. It's totally eliminated in 25. So that's a reduction of $500 million in receipts. So those are the large changes that really affect those ending balances.
Other questions? JG, on the Apex, I figured by the out years, that would be way, way more than what we're showing here. Are you being pretty conservative on the numbers, or?
The way we have this structured is how it was passed. It can be adjusted. So right now, we're projecting those payments over 10 years to be spread out over those 10 years for the infrastructure reimbursements that come back. So if we were to shorten that period of time by amount, then these increases, or these decreases actually, would compound as well. So instead of spreading the 5-year investment over 10 years, if we were to do that over 5 years, then those numbers would practically double.
I'm trying to remember, but I was thinking that the construction part of that was like 3 years. You know, they build so much and they get so much the first year, they build so much, the second year they get so much, they build the following, I think it was the third year for completion, and they would receive most of that, so.
That was the governor's proposal, was to have that spread out over those 3 years. The legislature, when it passed it, spread that out over 10 years.
Okay,
So that really lowered that number down substantially.
that's why the number changed. I was thinking we still on 3 years, and I'm thinking that.
Oh, this would not be this pretty.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, JG. Next, we'll have a overview for just what we have left here. We'll go over the list. I think, Amy, was you going to do that, or? We're just going to briefly go over the list that we had left from last week as far as some of the items we was waiting for additional information and so forth. I just want to go over it real quick here this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning,
You
Amy.
should have an ivory sheet in front of you. These are the items that we show the committee wanted to return to consider this week. I just want to note that when we talk about the memo, we're talking about this document from last week. So we're referencing back to the page numbers and the titles in this document. When we talk on this sheet, we're going back to this document. And we'll have each of the analysts come up and briefly talk about their items. So we'll start with Stephen and Department of Administration.
Thank you, Amy. And committee, we're just going to hear these. We're not going to discuss them as far as trying to solve any of these this morning. With a short time, we're just going to go over them so everybody knows where we're at and what's left. Welcome, Stephen.
Morning. The first item is the Department of Administration. It's the $10 million transfer from the SGF to the State Employee Health Plan Reserve Fund. The second item there is also with the Department of Administration is the consideration of adding $460 million for the resident tax rebate. The third item there is for the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System. This is just a consideration of SB 421, just to keep it on your radar. Currently sits with the Senate Committee of the Whole. The CCR has passed the House already. And then I'm going to hand it off to Sharday Kane for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation items.
Was there any questions for Stephen before he? Senator Petty.
I thought on the 10 million that we were going to get some more information this morning. Is that not correct?
We did ask for information. I don't know if, what, Senator McGinn?
Did somebody show up from HCC? I don't see anybody. Well, I'm on it. I did do a little bit more checking, but I was hoping we'd have somebody from the administration. But it's basically a little reserve padding so that those of us that are on the HCC can start lowering the rates that people have to pay for their insurance. So it's just because there's a volatility. You just, in the insurance world, you just don't want to start lowering and then we have to go raise it again. So, but if you want more information, I'll find the person that needs to be here and bring them back next time we meet.
Yeah, it basically smooths it so we don't have the big peaks and valleys. You're
And
right.
then it gives us the flexibility to start lowering.
If it would be helpful, the projected ending balances are included within the annual report that the Healthcare Commission submits to the legislature. We can forward that along to you when I get back to my computer.
I asked this question because I thought that that was part, and I appreciate Senator McGinn actually shared that on Thursday as well, that whether we were going to take a position.
Right, we're not doing any positions today, but just information. And I thought somebody would be here to say, here's what we're doing, kind of like Senator McGinn did. We're taking the peaks and the valleys and kind of leveling it off with these dollars. And so, but if we can have, we'll be meeting tomorrow. We'll have somebody here. Can we do that, Stephen? All right. Any other questions for Stephen? Seeing none, thank you, Stephen.
Good morning.
Morning, Sharday.
Both of these items are pertaining to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. The first being considering paying off the Forensic Science Laboratory bond. So just as a reminder, the bond currently is $41.2 million plus interest up to whatever payoff date it will be. Annual payments are $4.3 million SGF. It's a 20-year bond with 5% interest rate. This is callable, so there is no payment for early payoff, and if it is paid off in fiscal year 2022, then it will be approximately 10.7 million savings, and if it is 2023, it would be about 9.1 million in savings. The other Kansas Bureau of Investigation item is related to Senate Bill 366. Which allows certain drug offenders to file a petition for relief after 5 years. The agency requests $57,000 SGF and 1 FTE to administer this program if it is passed into law. And the committee decided to put this one off because it has not been voted on the Senate floor as of yet.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sharday, on the Forensic Science Laboratory bond, it does say in the memo that it is, the annual payments are approximately 4.3 million SGF. Is that the entirety of the payment, or is 4.3 million of the payment SGF and the payment is higher and contains other funds?
It is all SGF.
All SGF. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When is that forensic laboratory bond due? You said it was a 20-year bond originally?
Yes, it is a 20-year bond, so it would be 2034.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Sharday.
Thank you.
Good morning, committee. My name is Gabrielle. There are 3 items for the Kansas Department of Education on your ivory sheet. 2 of them pertain to GBAs. The first one is GBA number 2, item 10 on page 7. There is a misprint on your ivory sheet that is not for state foundation aid. It is just for Capers USD. The second item there is item C in our memo. It covers the entirety of the Kansas Department of Education budget. In the memo, we do detail House, Senate, and conference positions. And your ivory sheet also has GBA number 2, item 11, page 7, which pertains to special education excess costs.
Questions for Gabrielle? Senator Petty.
I know you said we're just going over this, but I do have a question as to when are we actually going to discuss the education items? Because I brought that up on Thursday. We did not talk about anything that's on page 10 or 11 in the omnibus conference. And I think we should be.
It will come up, and we're not going to leave it off the table. I mean, I don't know which day or what, but we're working all week and maybe next week and maybe the week after. Might be here till July, but we got to pass it.
That's a very pessimistic attitude. I was thinking maybe tomorrow, or we might be talking about.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Gabrielle.
Mr. Chairman, the next item, it was the legislature's budget on page 12 for the KLIS modernization project. There were some questions concerning where else Propylon had participated and worked. The information I received was they have worked with 12 state legislatures and a number of national parliaments on legislative management solutions. The state legislatures they're currently working in are North Dakota, Ohio, Indiana, New York, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Montana, Michigan, South Carolina, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. Would note that these projects are varied in the scope depending on the existing technology. Their most recent implementations have been incorporating Microsoft Word-based drafting in Montana and Michigan, and they are currently rolling out in South Carolina.
So have we contracted with them, or is there a RFP out there, or?
So the RFP went out in November. The procurement negotiating committee is still in the process of negotiating with Propylon for a contract that has not yet been signed.
Other questions? Senator Soltrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did receive a report that they are satisfied to date with their negotiations and the process as they're moving forward. So again, thank you, Amy, for that information. Just wanted to back up on where they were working with, who they were working with, and make sure we got confidence in their system. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there was another question also. I think there had been a question of the original cost of the development. And my understanding was that was $8.6 million in 2005 through 2011.
Thank you. Senator Hawk.
Just to follow up to that question, I appreciate that, Amy. Are these other states spending approximately $5 million to update their system? Do we have any way of knowing?
I do not have any way of obtaining that information, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Amy.
And Matt is up next.
Morning, Matt.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The first item is with respect to Larned State Hospital on page 14. It was the consideration of the GBA number 2, item 5, the contractual nursing staff. There were some questions last week regarding how many contracted nursing staff versus how many FTEs the agency had. They just provided me some information that there are 236 filled FTE positions that are nursing and 346 vacant positions that are nursing. And they currently use 144 contractual nursing staff. There were also some questions regarding exit surveys, and I believe that the committee wanted the agency to be available, and I think that there is a representative of the agency to provide some information.
They're here on,
I believe so.
okay. Someone here? Please come up and state your name.
Hello, Lee Keck with ks. I can print the information off for you that we provided Matthew this morning about answering your questions, and there's some charts on essentially the total expenditures at Larned State Hospital for contract nursing are 25.4 million, but we have, the GBA is only 5.5 million. We've been able to cover the other costs with COVID relief funding, one-time funds, some unbudgeted Title 19 funds. But essentially, these costs have already been incurred for staff that are under contract at negotiated rates in the contract. So we're just looking to cover that remaining 5.5 million with the GBA.
So do you have any idea of how we're going to solve this problem? I mean, it seems to be like the people that work there are better off to quit and go to work for the agency and make more money.
As a facility that has to provide 24/7 care, we need people there. We are working on recruitment and retention. The 24/7 pay plan has certainly helped with that, and we're working to continue to fill staff positions.
So do you have a number of how many people work there full-time that have FTEs that have quit and now are working there as travelers?
We'd have to go through the contracts and look at employees' names to find that number. It certainly has happened, but it's more of an anecdotal situation. It's not like the majority of contract staff were formerly employees and then joined an agency. I think a lot of them are from out of state and those traveling agencies that go from state to state where they're needed. We can work to get you that number, but that's not something I have offhand, no.
So is this staff shortage, is that what's impacting our getting youth into the facility down there?
We don't have any youth at Larned.
But we moved them out, so, but I'm getting emails every week from High Plains Mental Health.
Okay, I believe that's a separate issue than the
different?
contract nursing at Larned, correct? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just wondered if that was
Yeah.
complicating things, the reason we weren't getting folks the services they needed.
I mean, certainly lower staffing levels do impact how many beds we can have available.
How many beds do you have at Larned?
Ooh, we've got 3 different programs. I know on the forensic side, it is about 70 or 80 beds that are open right now. In the psychiatric side, I'd have to double check my numbers. I want to say around 100 off the top of my head, but I'll see if I can find an exact number on that.
So 70 or 80 open, so maybe 100 full. Is that what, so 180 total beds there?
I would say in that range.
Okay. Other questions to Senator Soltrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have a perhaps 3-year average of what contracting nursing costs might have been prior to the pandemic and in more normal times, so we can have a comparative look at it?
Certainly, yes. And I've got charts on all the state hospitals that institute contract nursing going back to FY18 on the cost. They've certainly increased during the pandemic, but they've always been there. So I'll print out these charts and get that to all of you.
Thank you.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed a number of unfilled nursing positions. How many was that?
Okay, as of April 20th, the 582 nursing positions at Larned, which includes registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, licensed mental health technicians, and mental health and developmental disability technicians. That's the category we're talking about, 582 total positions. 236 were filled and 346 were vacant. However, we used 144 contract nursing staff, which lowered that vacancy rate.
Thank you. Are the 346, are they budgeted? Are they funded? Those 346 positions that are unfilled, are they funded?
Can I get back to you on that?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Senator Hawkins.
Thank you, Lee. I'm not sure you can answer my question. I think there's a larger context in terms of all the hospitals in Kansas, in terms of the number of nursing positions that are unfilled that have moved to contract nursing. Do you have any sense of what that, and I know it was certainly more difficult during some of the COVID numbers over the past year to 2 years. Do you have any sense of, are we out of norm where it's a bigger problem at Larned, or is that just a reflection of what's happened to all of our hospitals with contract nursing?
Certainly, yeah. I don't have numbers, but this isn't limited to state hospitals. It's an issue at private hospitals across the country, at nursing homes. It's not just state hospitals that are experiencing this.
Okay, thank you.
Senator
If
Petty.
we ever find out just kind of where we are relative to the more global picture, I'd be interested in that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. Lee, on that 346 vacant, is that 346 vacant nursing positions? Because I know that would impact what we're talking about as far as the amount of the daily cost for contracting as opposed to another type of position. So is that nursing?
Those, not specifically, it's registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, licensed mental health technicians, and then the mental health and developmental disability technicians. Those are direct service positions. It's not just RNs, though.
Okay, so that would have a different, when we see these figures that it could cost up to $200 per hour for a contract nurse, that this is a broader staff.
Correct, yes. And we do use contract folks for those other positions too, beyond just the nurses. But the nurses are the most expensive.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.
The next item that I had was with KDAD's on page 15, item item B, the additional language to make the 15 million allocation for the regional mental health bed expansion contingent on state finance council approval. This was again the discussion of the beds that are currently planned for Wichita, Sedgwick County area. And again, I believe that the desire was to have someone available from the agency to answer any questions regarding those beds and the plans moving forward.
Do we have someone here?
I believe that would, again, possibly be Lee.
Sorry, I didn't know you was up again. I think we had some questions. Who had the question? Remember on this one? Was that you, Senator Saltram? On the beds in Sedgwick County, for the expansion of the
Yes, it was just.
mental health bed expansion in Sedgwick
wanted to,
County.
I guess, more clarification as to what the 15 million is really for. And perhaps the senator from, the other senator from Sedgwick County can give me that information as well. But initially it was for findings, research, things like that. Now it seems to have morphed into, well, no, we're going to spend a little bit more on facilities and things like that. So I've never received anything in detail. Perhaps somebody else has, but I think we need that before we can make a rational decision. So thank you.
Senator McGinn?
I think the problem we have, as I continue to talk to different folks from the area, we're still not on the same page. We all know we need beds, but how we get there everybody's got a different idea. And so, since we're not taking action today, I have no problem making a few phone calls. I understand there's a plan out there, but I have not seen the plan, and that's a plan I believe Via Christi did, Ascension. But I'd like to hear your feedback. I believe you said you had the meeting a week or two ago, and you know, I went to the Mental Health Coalition the other night, talked to, you know, some of their folks that do the crisis beds. And again, it's just every time I talk to a different person, we're just not all on the same page. And could you kind of let us know if you kind of heard a common theme at that meeting you had?
Yeah, I think a first point of clarification is that Sedgwick County has several projects going on. They've got the mental health campus that they're working on, and I think a lot of times this is getting confused with the regional bed state hospitals. Those are separate proposals. And the Sedgwick County is doing their mental health campus on their own. That's not part of this request or budget item. The regional beds are a separate issue. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion has been coming from. As far as I know, there's been confusion about the location. You know, there's no funding secured at this point for regional beds. They put in a Spark request for $40 million, and then there's this $15 million in the budget. Not sure if they're gonna get either or what percentage of those at this point, so you can't determine a location when you don't have a budget set. So I think those are a lot of the confusion I've heard from legislators come from those topics. As far as at the meeting we talked about, you know, it's still going to be at least several weeks until the Spark Committee makes their recommendations on funding. There are many more projects recommended than there's funding available for. So they're not certain how much of that 40 million request they're going to get. So in this first year, knowing that it's going to take time to construct or renovate a facility, the $15 million could be used to supplant and help with that construction or renovation, because we can't, you know, operate a facility and have staff in there until the facility is there. In ongoing years, it would be an ongoing budget item for operational costs is what that would cover.
May I?
Yes.
So one is location. You're correct. In their plan, when you really got down to it, it did not have to go on that campus.
Correct.
It just needed to be close, and it could, there's a number of places that it could be 20 minutes away.
Correct.
So that's a good thing. That opens our options and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing about Spark, what I would somehow suggest, and I don't have that drafted yet and solid in my head, is putting, if you put the 15 million out, that perhaps it would be something that does work with Spark. If they don't get the Spark money, I don't think we're going to do a building at least this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'm fine with the 15 million for operations thereafter, but it's just really the whole trying to figure out where the building would be. If they don't get the Spark money and we put in 15, are they going to come up with the rest? You know, there's too many unknowns out there right now.
Mm-hmm. We've only had brief conversations about that at this point, hoping for the Spark money and legislative money. And, you know, if that doesn't happen here, we'll find out within the next few weeks and start working on another plan to come up with funds for the building.
Final comment, please.
Sure.
I wish the county would have a workshop that they have available to them on Tuesday, take some action at a regular board meeting, and write us a letter and tell us what their plan is. All 5 commissioners being on the same page, but that's just more of a editorial comment. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Solentrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And along with those remarks, again, as been stated, we know that there's a need. That's not been the question. The question is, what's the plan? What's the details? And we've not got that. And it's been very frustrating to me. I would be open to setting this money aside for the very purpose of this hospital, especially since we have the possibility of obtaining Spark money. But that we don't release the funds whatsoever until a detailed plan satisfactorily presented to either this committee or the full legislature can be seen, reviewed, and approved. I mean, that's a simple request. So, you know, again, if we can set it aside and get the detail and everybody's satisfied with what the model is that they're proposing, then I'd be in favor of setting the money out there for it. Thank you.
Senator McGinn's agreeing. Anybody else? Senator Hawk.
Just a clarification for our two Sedgwick County senators. Is that wording in Part B sort of what you're getting at, is that State Finance Council would do that approval based on having a better plan? Was that the intent of that wording? Or are you suggesting even tightening that down further? Just curious.
Senator McGinn.
Just a suggestion, if we are able to put it aside for a plan and contingent on Spark and other things, I think it should go, the presentation, since we're not here all year, should go to the Legislative Budget Committee when they have an interim, so that whether it's Senator Kirshen, Senator McGinn, or Senator Sollentrop wants to participate in that, I mean, we can come and make comment, but there would be a thorough discussion before it would go to State Finance Council.
Senator Sollentrop? Good, okay. Senator Hawk?
Yes, then I think we need to add, if we get to that point later this week, we need to add that language as you're suggesting beyond what it says here on the tan sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
The final item that I had was, again, on page 15, item C, funding for the 988 Behavioral Health Crisis Hotline and status of the bill and Senate Bill 19. My understanding that last week was that we kind of pushed this off to this week to see, it's currently in conference committee. A conference hasn't been called. And so we were kind of wanted to wait to see whether or not a conference was called. And thus far, as of today, I checked earlier that there has not been a conference called on that particular bill. So,
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? Senator Sollentrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I made a couple remarks in regards to the 988 number, and I think it's been misconstrued on what I was saying, because I feel strongly that our 911 system in Kansas needs to be updated, and I'm afraid the 988 system will morph into the same problem we have with the 911. We have roughly 150 locations for 911. We need to get down to one. We need to staff it with professionals, whether it's 300, 500, or whatever. It needs to be in a secured location with redundancy, so there's no risk of failure. We need to have the technology in there and the relationship around the state with first responders so that we can respond in the best professional manner we possibly can. So when I made my remarks about the 988 number, it was about the system, not the fact that we need to reach out to mentally challenged individuals. There's been some mistake on my intention of those remarks, and I just wanted to clarify them today. It has to do with the mechanics, purely mechanics, not about the mental health problems that exist out in our society today. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Matthew, or Matt, excuse me. Shirley, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Committee. You are being handed a goldenrod sheet of paper. This was a request by the committee for additional information on what ads were provided to the regents and the regents institutions for 2023. This is part of, on page 27, item B, the deletion of the 20.7 million from the post-secondary education operating grant. On this goldenrod sheet, on the top, you will see these are the adds to the Board of Regents and 2 of the state universities from both the governor and the legislature in state general funds. That totals $148.7 million. The bottom half of that sheet is the federal ARPA funds. We have the 10 community colleges. Then there's a line for Washburn, the additional community colleges and technical colleges. There's a line for private and independents, the Board of Regents, KU and Wichita, KU and K-State, that totals $208.5 million for a total add in 2023 for the regents, the universities, and all the colleges of $357.3 million.
Thank you, Shirley. And so what we have left to figure out is the deletion of the 20.7 million SGF from the operation grants.
Correct, and I'll just clarify that. That is going into the university's operating expenditures versus what you see on the sheet, which are specific, except for that top line item, which that is that operating grant. Everything else on the sheet are very specific projects or programs.
Questions for Shirley? Senator Hawk.
Just to clarify, the original budget we were dealing with had $45.7 million for operating grants, right?
Correct. If you look at that very top line item, it's 25 million. If you add the 20.7, you get the 45.7.
So what's in question is whether we add that back in or
Correct.
not. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Shirley, just for clarification, so on that 20.7 million, we replaced that with some federal funds, is that right?
No,
We didn't?
no.
Okay, because remember,
This
we
is just-
adjusted all that federal, so,
The federal is the lower half of the sheet, and those are for projects.
okay, and this is just for operations.
Correct. That's state general fund. It would be operating, and it would go into their base budget continuously. It would not be one-time money.
So the 20 million on the operating grant is in addition to the 25 million that's already there?
Correct, because the original governor's proposal was 45.7.
Okay, and we'd put it at 25.
Correct. You took out the 20.7.
Okay, this was the total fund deal, okay.
Correct.
Now we've got it straight, okay. Any other, Senator Soltron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unless others are comfortable, are we going to meet again tomorrow or Wednesday?
Oh, yeah. I think we'll try to meet tomorrow.
Okay. I'd propose we put it off till tomorrow so that
Well, we're just discussing, so everybody kind of gets back onto exactly where it's from and what we're talking about. Thank you, Shirley. Dylan?
Mr.
morning.
Chairman, if, I didn't know if we were pausing here or if you wanted to continue to the next item.
I think we just had two, if we can just briefly go over them and.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can do that. So we have Department of Commerce, memo page 32. This is Apex. The decision was around whether to appropriate the funds. Once again, this is not a direct dollar funding decision. The question is simply whether you want to add the funds to the bill in order that you could, at some point in the future, put money in those funds, if you were to choose so.
Right, so there's no money with it, it's just.
Just language to allow the money to flow when you make that decision.
Okay, everybody clear on that? Okay.
All right, the next item is Department of Transportation. The item was on page 33, SB 313. The consideration on was whether to add the $18,120 from the State Highway Fund for the memorial highways. There's also HB 2478 that is out there, thank you, that has Sergeant Evan Parker, PFC Shane Austin, and also a Veteran Memorial Bridge. That brings the total to $31,520. Once again, this is not an actual expenditure of direct funds. It comes from donations. So the new number is $31,520. All right.
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Dylan.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, I know we're running a few minutes late, but just briefly, I know Senator McGinn has a proviso she wanted to just kind of get us to start thinking about, and Senator Kirshen has one too. So Senator McGinn.
All right, I'll try to be brief. I know our time is against us here. This has to do with a request from Envision, and it has to do with helping people reach independence that are developmentally disabled and also legally blind. They need $500,000 to do some renovation to get it up to what is required by the final rule that will be in 2023. What this does is helps people who have become blind. So if you think about School for the Blind, you didn't grow up blind, you became blind, or you also have a disability in some way. So it helps them learn independent skills so that they can either have their own living space or they can figure out how to find a niche for a job. It's kind of a daycare support right now. But anyway, because of this rule, this is one-time money that they need, they have to renovate it to make it in compliance with this new final rule that's coming up. The cost is a little bit greater than that, but they are going to find private donors to fund the rest. So I can give you more details when we thoroughly talk about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kirshen. Senator Petty.
Senator McGinn, is Envision, where are they based?
They are out of Wichita, but they have a lot of other things going on throughout the region. And I can get that for you.
Okay, so that 500,000 is for multiple locations or one?
No, it's one location.
Wichita.
They actually have a wait list of 4,500 people. So it's across the state. There are other entities doing this across the state, and they expect that some of those entities will probably shut this program down because of this rule that they have to do. So they're just requesting it because they serve a very large population.
But the 500,000 is for the facility in Wichita?
One-time money, yes.
Thank you.
Senator Kirshen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did everybody get I had a handout. Pass out. Thank you very much. While he's passing that out, what it is we've had a budget recommendation from Department of Agriculture, and on this page, there are 3 items, 1, 2, and 3. We were talking the other day, and we decided if we was going to prioritize which one we had to have, we're only going to talk about that one. And that'd be on item 3 on the back page, and that's the $350,000 for a needs assessment for Kansas State University, for the dairy at K-State. And in the background is a question about eventually replacing the dairy, that facilities we already have. This is preliminary. We want to do this needs study. I'm glad it said it wasn't a study, because we don't need to study a bunch of stuff. We want to know what the needs are and how the research fits that package in the whole scheme of things. And with the Hilmer Dairy out in western Kansas being developed now, and it definitely has a place for it. And I mentioned that I served several years on a corporate board of Dairy Farmers America when I was in the milk business, and they moved their corporate headquarters to Kansas just a couple of years ago. So we've got a presence here to help Kansas move on in the future. That's what we want to do.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Senator Clays. The bids and the fire marshal.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just add to our review the raises that we discussed about bids in the state fire marshal. I think we'll have more information on that when we meet next, and we can review that as well.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.